everybody, and welcome to episode 7 of Not Your Average PK. Wow, I can't believe that it's been 7 episodes already. This is crazy. I feel like I just started it. But if you're with me today, if you're watching, if you're listening, I'm so glad that you're here. My name's Carissa. I'm your host. I am Not Your Average PK. If you're new here, PK stands for Pastor's Kid. I did grow up in a Christian household. I am a Christian, and I am a pastor's kid. And so today on our episode, we are going to be talking about Gen Z. So I am part of Gen Z. I know that a lot of people probably watching or listening are also a part of this generation. If you're my friend or anything like that, then you most likely are. And this has been a hot topic lately because if you're in Gen Z, we're kind of like in our prime time right now of being ridiculed or being observed or critiqued, because I feel like this happens to every generation while they're in their 20s. It's kind of where you're highlighted because we're finally starting to understand how they work, what they do. You're really honed down on the specific age group. We're now entering the workforce, leaving school, and entering into adulthood. And so that's why I feel like we're highlighted right now. But with that specifically, I hear all the time the same thing coming from pastors, coming from parents, families, even teachers, churches, of how do we reach Gen Z? How do we reach the next generation? They feel like we're just so far off, so far out there. We're weird. We're very different from all previous generations, and they don't know what to do with us. Like, everyone is confused on who are these weirdos? How do we reach them? And like, are they too far gone? Almost. They're in this age that we have not really um, discovered. They're in this age that's completely new. And that's true for most people who are in most generations within their 20s. It's all very new to society and culture in general. And I'm sure that the same thing will happen to Gen Alpha when they reach this like prime age. And the same thing happened with millennials, and I know that it happened with Gen X as well. So I'm here as a person in her 20s, as a Gen Z leader, and somebody who has served the next gen for so many years. I've been heavily involved in leading youth and young adults at my church and even at my schools. And so I kind of just want to open up the conversation around the questions that I've heard about us. Talk about our strengths, let's talk about our weaknesses, let's talk about our hurts, our pains, what makes us the way that we are as people in Gen Z. And so the same people that I feel like are often asking me the question of how do we reach Generation Z? Like, they're so far off. Like, how do we mentor them? How do we foster connections with them? Are often the same people that unfortunately I hear saying things from the pulpit, saying these things online, saying these things to their children or different relatives, of comments like this: oh, technology is ruining you, you're the lost generation, you're addicted to your phone, you're addicted to social media, and like, back in my day, we didn't do it like that, why are you doing it like this? And so the same people that are trying to reach us are the same people that we hear making these comments that don't exactly make us feel reachable. They don't foster community, they don't foster connections, and they don't make us feel like we can trust you. And it almost feels like when we get these questions that they're posed in a condescending way of like, you're just this because you're like this, and it comes from a very misunderstood perception of us. And it makes us feel like the whole problem is on our end. Like hi, me, I'm the problem, it's me. Like, so meanwhile, we've just been born into this. So it's not necessarily something that we can control. We can't control how quickly social media has skyrocketed while we were growing up, or other things within technology. We've just been born into this. This is our culture. This is all that we know. This is how society works in the time that we've grown up. And instead of coming from a point of wanting to understand what we're going through or how this day and age necessarily affects us, it's just been a lot of pointing the finger of, you're just like this because of your phone. You have the power to change and to go against the grain, not be addicted to social media, not be addicted to this. You're too reliant on technology. Maybe to some degree those things are true, but do you think that we'll necessarily be open to any discussion or change or come to any type of understanding if we feel like we're constantly being told that we're the problem? And I really just feel like there's deep misunderstanding of Gen Z that genuinely breaks my heart, because I see a generation that is hungry for development, hungry for mentorship, hungry for learning, hungry for change, that's passionate and wants to see this world become a better place. And yet nobody to grab our hands, nobody to do this alongside of us, nobody who's older and wiser and more seasoned to embrace us in a loving way where we feel safe, where we feel comfortable, where we feel understood. And so I think the problem really derives from distrust, and it is not an environment that is breeding unity, that's breeding peace, or that's breeding true impact, positive impact and change for the greater good or for the next gen. And I feel like a lot of times we're expected as Gen Z to meet other generations where they're at, more usually the more seasoned ones, rather than them coming down and meeting us where we're at. And so it's almost like we're expected to change in order to meet them rather than just being authentically us and having somebody else authentically seek a relationship with us. And so it's hurtful. It can be very hurtful sometimes, coming from things that I've seen in other people, coming from my own experience, ways that I have to just brush things off and build up some thick skin, even in the church setting, from the things that I hear on the pulpit about my generation, about who I am, why I am the way that I am, simply because of the year that I was born. Things that I can't control. I can't control when I was born and into what environment I was born. And truthfully, each generation is very different culturally, and we all kind of think like our way is the best, we're the best, like we know better. None of us know better. We're meant to all collectively be working together, holding hands, and building upon one another's strengths, knowledge, and understanding, and even wisdom and experience. But I feel like we haven't been able to do that right now because nobody is trying to authentically reach us. If they want to reach us, it's kind of like, oh, we want the numbers. We want the extra young people in our church to show people that we're a multi-generational church, but we don't actually want you for who you are and where you're at. If you want to come here, if you want to come to the table, if you want to sit at the table with us, you've got to change your clothes first. You've got to take off that hat first. You got to change those shoes first. They don't fit on our table. But if I remember correctly, Jesus's table had all different kinds of people. And so when I see how Jesus led his ministry, I'm not necessarily seeing that reflected in the way that people are trying to reach Gen Z in this day and age. And I could be wrong. There's lots of people that are great at doing it very well. This isn't necessarily to point fingers or to say that you're doing things bad, you need to change, but more just to open up a conversation of why has this been happening? Because it has been. I've experienced it and I've seen it. And how can we grow from it? And how can we build generational bridges? And how can we build multi-generational churches, workplaces, environments? Because I think that it's very important for us to not remain isolated within our age groups, within our generations, within our cultures, but to be well-rounded and have lots of people at our table, lots of different kinds of people, lots of people from all different ages. And so being that I can only be from one generation, that's the one that I'm going to speak on behalf of today. Although there's lots to say from each generation. And so I think just opening up the conversation in general is helpful. And so again, I feel like with Gen Z, a lot of times we feel like the effort that's put in is more so fake rather than authentic. Like, I'm going to put on this whole show and it's going to reach Gen Z. I'm going to get the smoke machines, the cool lights, all that, whatever. But I'm not going to try to reach their heart. But I'm not going to try to get to know who they are. And I feel like we've been deeply hurt by that. And we also, it turns us off when we can spot something super ingenuine from a mile away. When somebody's being fake, when somebody's not authentic, it doesn't impress us what you bring to the table. All we want is just to be seen, just to be loved, just to be heard exactly as we are. So I would say the first thing is just being genuine, being authentic, and trying to build those authentic relationships. I would say another thing is that we're constantly in this tension of we're too young to be a leader, but we're too old to still be figuring it out. That's what I've experienced and seen because we're in our 20s, because we're making that transition into adulthood now, into the workplace. Is the first time that we're not in school for our whole lives, which is a whole nother topic, but that's a crazy transition to think about. Your entire life, almost since birth, you've been in school, and now finally you know that you're never going to go back to school again. It's a hard thing to sit with, but there's so many different transitions when you're in your 20s, and it's that constant tension of being too old to be dependent on your parents or on your family, but too young to be fully independent. Too old to be looked at as a kid, but too young to be looked at as a legitimate adult. You're an adult, but you're a young adult. You're not a really credible adult. Like, it's like you're a fake baby adult. Okay, well, what am I then? Because I've got to pay taxes. I don't have health care anymore, or I'm about to get off my parents' health care. What am I? So it's just that constant tension of never fitting in any kind of category in terms of being an adult or being a leader or something like that, and also not be taken seriously by other more seasoned adults or more seasoned leaders because we're just now transitioning into that area. So it's just like almost not having a place to call home, not having a place to be rooted and grounded, and being a nomad in our 20s. And it's hard. And I think a lot of times because of that, we also feel incredibly isolated and misunderstood because there's so many things that we want to conquer, so many areas that we want to impact, that we want to see change, except we don't feel equipped and we don't feel guided. And so we're just isolated within our own generation. And even if we reached out for help, I feel that we wouldn't get the help that we necessarily need, because it'd have to be their way or the highway, if that makes sense. And that's just not really how we work. And I would say another thing that's been a struggle for Gen Z is that we have seen more trauma in a week than most people experience in a lifetime. Hear me out, I'm going to tell you why. Before social media really took off, or it was even a thing, when something happened that was bad, that was global or local or nationally, whatever, you would see it on the news or you would hear about it word of mouth. Um, and that's kind of it. Like, you'd see it in the newspaper and you'd hear about it. But with us, when something bad is happening, we're the first ones to see it on social media. We can see like literally 100 bad things within scrolling for 2 minutes. We are bearing the burdens of everybody else's trauma, of everybody else's anxiety, of everybody else's depression just by going on our phone for 1 minute. We can find out about more deaths in a minute than anyone has been able to for their entire lifetime. Were we meant to bear that much trauma, to bear that much tragedy, to bear that much anxiety? I don't think so. And so our mental health, I believe, has suffered because of that, because we are bearing burdens that we were never meant to bear. And so even if there has been more traumatic events in the past, it doesn't matter, because we are now absorbing all traumatic events currently happening, has happened in the past, and future fears of ones coming up. And so everything all at once in our minds, just from opening up our phones. We don't have to go out of our way. We don't have to search for a newspaper. We don't have to spark up a conversation on our own. It's involuntarily just given to us, all within the span of like a couple minutes or even seconds, which is wild. And we can hear about thousands dead. We can hear about several new wars. We can hear about countless heartbreaks, our friends, our loved ones sick, dying, people that we know who have experienced death that we don't even really know that well. But here we are bearing the burdens of even strangers' mental health struggles, and even strangers' tragedies and horrific things that have happened to them, all in this one phone, all in a couple seconds. And not just that, but we've gone through a lot in the past couple years in our what's supposed to be our prime time or whatever. For example, we had COVID, something that we've never experienced before as a world, as a nation. This was completely new. Had a complete world shutdown, lockdown, never heard of before, where we had to miss out on key, excuse me, guys, where we had to miss out on key milestones in our life that would take us from point A to point B because of this shutdown and because of this crazy epidemic, pandemic, whatever. That was one thing. Then it was racial tensions and protests and all this craziness basically happening at the same time, which was crazy. And then we had just from there, the world has just been on like a spiral, and we feel like we can't get a mental break. And for the same thing that we are being ridiculed of, like, oh, you just have anxiety because you're on your phone all the time. You're addicted to your phone. You're just isolated because you're addicted to your phone. You're addicted to social media, so that's why you feel that way. No, I am feeling anxious because I'm bearing the burdens of thousands of other people's anxiety. I'm feeling isolated because I physically can't feel okay in the morning knowing everything that everyone else is going through the rest of the world. I'm feeling deeply saddened and deeply hurt because how can I feel okay when I know the suffering of hundreds of other people around me right now? And so I think that we need to take that into account when critiquing Gen Z, when observing their habits, um, because we've had to process a lot and we constantly have to process more than any other generation has ever had to process before because of the day and age that we live in of social media and technology. And I think that while it can make us stronger, and I think it has made us stronger as a generation, but can also make us weaker because of everything that we have to process all at once from a million different people. It's really hard to be okay mentally knowing every bad thing that's happening in the world going on at the same time. And yeah, I just really want to hit that hard. I feel like n- it's something that makes us unique, and it's something that nobody has ever had to deal with before to the extent that we have to deal with. Even millennials, they didn't grow up necessarily with all the social media that we have, like TikTok, Instagram, and stuff like that. So we've gotten it worse, and yet we are criticized harder for it when it's not necessarily our faults. And the things that we are dealing with, like anxiety, depression, loneliness, a lot of times are a result of this, and yet we're just told to like put down your phone and you'll get out of it. Put down your phone, don't look at your phone, and you won't be anxious anymore. You won't be lonely anymore. Well, that's not necessarily true. And it's kind of hard to do that in a day and age where we are heavily reliant on our phones and on social media for things like work, school, making a living, like getting acclimated in anything in society or culture. So it's really not that simple or easy. Um, anyways, that's more of the backstory of why we are the way that we are, kind of a little bit behind that. And I would say one of our weaknesses is that if we don't care about something, we're not going to do a good job with it. That's like something I think older generations do really well. They've mastered this kind of mindset of like, I am this by day and this by night. But we're kind of like, no, we want to be all in or all out. I want to be this daytime and nighttime and be fully dedicated, fully devoted to it, or I'm not going to do it at all. In fact, I'm not going to do anything that I don't deeply care about. I'm not deeply passionate about. I've got to get a job in which I can work based off of my passions. I've got to do the thing that makes me want to wake up in the morning for a living. So I think that's a weakness and a strength. I think that it's been misunderstood as laziness a lot of times because we don't want to just get a 9 to 5 job that's like a regular corporate, climbing up the corporate ladder job. We don't want just like a government or blue collar job because we don't care about the work we don't care about that work. We want to do something that we're deeply passionate about. And so we're willing now to sacrifice stability for our passions. And also goes back to the whole distrust thing because you are telling us to go to school, get a government job, or like get a 9 to 5 corporate job, whatever. And yet we've seen it not work out so many times. We've seen now heard of like, hey, we're not even getting Social Security anymore. So why are we doing this? Or hey, we went to school and we did what everything that you said to do, and we still can't get a job. We've seen that our degree is kind of becoming more meaningless unless if you are becoming a doctor, lawyer, scientist, teacher, something like that. And so, what is the incentive? We're seeing that the things that you told us to do are no longer exactly working for us and working for this culture. So, we're not really trusting that word anymore. Um, and we have sort of a lack of trust in institutions in general, because of that. And I would say that that goes all the way back to the Vietnam War. And since then, we've collectively, as a society, had less and less trust in our government or in any institutions, including churches, family, all of that, ever since the Vietnam War. And it's just been going lower and lower and lower and lower. And so now we're like, hey, I'm going to do something that I fully believe in, that I fully trust in, that I fully just resonate with the mission of, and I'm going to dedicate my whole self to that. So, what can often be perceived as just being lazy for not wanting to just do any job just for the sake of money or stability or security is actually a just redirected passion for things that we deeply care about. And I feel like that we really need to understand that as well, because that's another thing that I hear just being ridiculed on Gen Z. Like, you're just lazy, you just don't want to do it. You just you don't want to do a job that's not fun. Like, you're just addicted to dopamine and to pleasure or whatever. And maybe to some degree that is true, but I don't think that that is the root reason of why we've had like a sudden shift in perspective and shift in what we're doing with our lives and even shift in jobs. And the funny thing is that I've never seen so many self starters. I've never seen so many entrepreneurs. I've never seen so many people that are ditching this typical work or job, whatever, and are being ridiculed for it. But then, meanwhile, what I'm seeing is a generation of passion, a generation of self starters, a generation of entrepreneurs, a generation of people who are making their heart, making their passions, making their what makes their heart beat their job and their sole purpose in life. So I actually think it's pretty incredible to see all of that, that whatever you whatever you love in life, there's probably some way that you can monetize it, some way that you can get creative and make money for it. And we've never seen it before like this. You know, people are making a living and a large living off of watching other people play video games, of streaming, or streaming themselves play video games, or reacting to other people's already made videos. And I think that it's incredible. And I think that that's another thing that we're ridiculed for is like, oh, you have a fake job. Well, it's making more money than your job. So, how is that a fake job? It's paying all the bills, it's paying the rent, it's actually funding a lot of great things. And so, how is that not perceived as a real job? So, that's another thing is that whatever we do, we've been doing it very differently. And because it's different, it has been perceived as just not credible in adulthood, in the workplace, from other more seasoned adults. It's just like been shooed off as some kind of fake job, some kind of just silly endeavor that you're on. And meanwhile, it's a whole career that you've created out of something that you love. And yeah, so I think that that is both started off as our weakness, which I think then led into some of our strengths of really just chasing our passions and creatively monetizing them, which I've never seen anybody do the way that Gen Z does. And I think it's incredible. And I would also say that because of that, we don't feel taken seriously in the new workplace that we just entered into. Um, Again, like we're just kind of crapped on for saying that we're lazy and unwilling to just do a job that we don't like, which I don't necessarily think is the case. I think that we are a very powerful generation that's standing up for what we believe in, and that we literally can't, in our bodies, in our bones, in our minds, work for something that we don't believe in. Put energy towards things and ideas that we disagree with, because we so badly want to see a change in this world. We so badly want to see something different and make an impact. And I believe that if we were um, being taken under somebody's wing, that impact could be even greater than we ever imagined before. So I see a lot of passion, and I see not many pathways, healthy pathways for it to be put into. And I think that's where older generations come into play with us, of like guiding us, giving us the right pathways so that we're not and isolated in misguided passion. And I would say another thing is that there's so much pressure put on next gen ministry that sometimes we feel like we're the answer. It's like people can't stop talking about Gen Z. And so sometimes I feel like it'll blow up our heads, blow up our ego of like, oh, we're the chosen ones. Like, and I think that happens with every next gen that's like in their 20s or emerging as youth, young adults, is that we feel like we're the needed change. We're just the answer, the solution. And I don't think that we need to put so much pressure on next gen, because it's not like one generation is more important than the next. It's not just like about passing the mantle or passing the torch. It's about coming together side by side, arm in arm, no matter who you are, no matter what age you are, in unity. That is what is the answer. That is what brings the change, is the unity. Coming together with all our different brains, resources, cultures, like everything coming together and creating something stronger than we had before. And yeah, I would say that really the only way to do that is, I would say that we need to know that we're not the answer, but that unity is the answer. And I think that that can only happen through Jesus. That's just me. I am a Christian. You guys know that. I believe Jesus came, died for us, and rose again so that we can rise with him. And so I believe that the only way for true peace, true unity, and true reaching and building bridges between generations is through Jesus. And I think that when we are able to achieve that, man, we're going to see just lives being changed. We're going to see this world being changed. We're going to see just insane impact for good, insane impact for the kingdom, and just see beauty, beauty in the unity. Right now, unity is kind of like a hot topic because people don't actually want unity. They just want revenge and justice, but that's a topic for a different time. But anyways, one last thing before we kind of just wrap this up that I forgot to say before is that reach us where we're at. If you really want to reach Gen Z, reach us where we're at. We're often asked to change first before stepping into the house. We're asked to change first before entering into the table, to lose the baggage, lose the hat, like I said before. morph into what is perceived as the right look, the right way, the right answer in order to just enter into the conversation and be invited into the table. So I would say just reach us where we're at. Strike when the iron is hot. Don't wait. If you see your young people eager, if you see them willing, if you see them just wanting to make an impact, wanting to be a change in their communities, don't try to change them first. Come meet them where they're at, and then take them under your wing and guide them from there alongside of their vision, their mission. Because if you remember correctly, I'm sure somebody else did that for you, or else you wouldn't really be able to be where you are today. And if you did do it alone, I'm sure it took a lot longer and you went through a lot more mistakes than were necessarily needed. But, anyways, again, I feel like the answer is unity. The answer is building bridges between generations and working together side by side rather than just passing over the mantle, passing the torch. And I think that, again, that can only happen through Jesus. And so I just want to encourage you all today. If you're worried about next gen, if you're worried about Gen Z, if you are someone who's trying to reach them, that you would carefully consider the things that were mentioned today and really just try to come to their level, understand where they're coming from, what they've been through, who they are, without first making judgments, and just be real open. We should all be open to learning from each other always. And so, yeah, that goes for us as well, of course. But again, I'm just speaking from the perspective of Gen Z today. And just be open. Yeah. And I hope that this encouraged you. I hope that we can have more conversations like this and open up the table for more discussions surrounded um, surrounded by Gen Z, Next Gen, ministry, all that. But guys, thank you so much for listening or watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I love you all. I'm praying for you. And hope you can join me for the next episode. Bye, guys.